Welcome to Freedom Biz Now, the show dedicated to showcasing the best and brightest in business, big and small. Now, welcome the host, founding partner of Freedom Sports and Entertainment and the Freedom Digital Network, from ROC Vox Studios in Rochester, New York, Mark Washoe.
Everybody, good afternoon. Welcome to ROC Vox Studios here in Rochester, New York. And today I have a special guest, Breland Moore from KCTV News 5, but once here in Rochester. So, Breland, thanks so much for coming on. You didn't know we were so official here, did you?
No, but I'm super excited that you asked me to do this. And, it's been kind of a crazy year since I migrated from Rochester. So, yeah, I'm super excited to be here.
Awesome. So, well, first of all, welcome back to Rochester virtually. We all been living in the virtual world, as the saying goes. So, the first thing, I actually had a real live meeting. Actually, it was kind of down at the stadium not too long ago, and it was like interesting seeing live people again because we've been all in this virtual Zoom world, So, the first thing I was going to ask you about is kind of how your transition's been going, and everything else going on in the craziness of the world at the moment on the side, but. Because you made that transition from Allentown, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania area to, I guess, a bigger city, Rochester, New York, minor league town to minor league town, and then you transitioned to a major league town. I've had some similar experiences along the way. So what's that been like for you, and how's the ride been?
So this time I kind of learned some lessons from that first transition of going from the Lehigh Valley area in Pennsylvania to Rochester, because that was my first experience covering any pro sport. Lehigh Valley was really all minor league, and of course, Patriot League baseball, basketball, and football, as well as I did some Olympic track cycling as well in the velodrome near Drexler Town. But coming from the Lehigh Valley to Rochester, I learned a lot of lessons, and that was a really big kind of growth there. Just diving right into Bill's season, that was a lot. So. Kind of learned some lessons from that and took some cues from that the first time around. And so actually I knew kind of ahead of time that this was in the works, obviously before I announced it, that it was kind of already kind of a couple weeks ahead there of us just kind of working back and forth and interviewing with things and meeting the HR people, things like that. So while I was doing that, I found a couple of Chiefs podcasts, Arrowhead Pride, shout out Pete Sweeney. He's a very good friend of mine now, but beforehand, I had no idea who these people were, of course. But I was getting my information from Arrowhead Pride because they were constantly out at training camps and things like that. And I had no idea because I was at Bill's training camp and really kind of engrossed in Buffalo, Rochester stuff because I had to continue doing a job. So I kind of felt like I was cheating a little bit, because
Sure.
I would be driving to Bill's training camps or driving to, the Bill's preseason games and have Arrowhead Pride on in the car. So I could know what was going on with the Chiefs while also still covering the Bills. So it was a big transition. And I think just getting to know people's faces with their names was the biggest one because you kind of take that for granted after you're in a locker room for 3 seasons and everybody by their face, by their first name basis type of thing, and then coming in as the new person was it was rough, but I think it went much smoother. It was a little easier this time around because I was so prepared in terms of the team dynamic. I already knew that because I was studying and I was listening to everything leading up, and I didn't do that the first time. So it's been good, and of course the Super Bowl wasn't bad. Unfortunately, did not get my first experience with Royals, Sporting KC, or any March Madness, which is really unfortunate because Kansas had such a talented team, such a talented dynamic. I really thought they were going to go far, if not all the way. So that was kind of upsetting, but hey, Super Bowl was nice. So I can't really complain.
Totally. So you cover all the sports then. However, you did though kind of become the Chiefs beat reporter right as they went into the playoff run. Is that kind of accurate how that happened?
Yeah. So, while we're here, the Chiefs are king. NFL is king.
Of course.
In any NFL market, So we spent a lot of time focusing on the Chiefs during season, and then, out of season, we unfortunately did not get a chance to fully cover the Big 12 tournament this year because it shut down on its second day. But we would have paid the same attention to, Kansas, K-State, and Mizzou had they gone into the postseason for basketball. And then, of course, summertime would traditionally be Sporting Kansas City, which is the MLS team here, as you know, and, the Kansas City Royals, which is Major League Baseball. But they're not playing either, so.
Right. By the way, I've never been to the Sporting KC Stadium, but I heard it's pretty awesome. And
Oh,
it's
my goodness,
right.
so beautiful. Children's Mercy Park is amazing. It's unfortunate, like I said, that I haven't seen a game there, but they at least, and they were so welcoming when I got here. They gave me like a gift pack of just like some merch and things like that. Just, hey, welcome to Kansas City. Gonna hook you up with some sporting gear. Here's a scarf. Here's a track jacket. Like we look forward to seeing you. So super, super nice organization, and also just beautiful, beautiful place to play.
Yeah, I actually, now that you said that, I think I got a message from Wendy Dorkin, the Rhinos owner, saying, "Hey, look at what Breland got from the local soccer team. It's nice to take care of the media." I'm like, yes, that's a great thing. I was envious. I was like, they're on top of their game there for sure.
They sure are. Yeah, absolutely.
And that's got to make you feel welcomed, right? Coming to a new market and covering new teams, and I'm sure that was well appreciated by you.
Oh yeah, and they've been great about, like I said, I've only really covered a few things, just kind of like the meet and greet and kind of like a welcome back to the season that ended up not really existing. But I've done a couple of things with them, and they have just been so cooperative and so great. They are quickly becoming one of my favorite organizations here in town,
Awesome.
just because they're so accommodating.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, with coronavirus and everything that's been happening the last 2-3 months as it relates to COVID-19 specifically, I suppose, how has that changed? Because, we all know about sports business and the teams aren't playing and teams had seasons suspended, fans aren't going to stadiums. How has it changed your reporting and what you guys have been doing, and where have you shifted your attention and coverage, and how are you covering it when everything's kind of in this weird moment?
Right now, we are really focused on the return to play plans, especially because MLS, as you know, has approved a return to play plan. MLB has not, which is also a story, the just constant bickering between the players union and the league. Same thing, NBA and NHL also have approved their return to play plans as well. So just kind of really focusing on that, and also what the NFL is doing, because NFL is a constant. It is a 365 type of league nowadays. It doesn't shut down after February. You continuously get news out of there. So, we've really focused on what's going on for training camp. How are they handling virtual OTAs? And the Chiefs have been really awesome, and everybody's been really great. And I think that's the one thing about Kansas City media that I really appreciate, is that they have made players and coaches available throughout the NCAA level, as well as the professional sports teams, that just, hey, you can log on to talk to Coach Reed in this Zoom call, if you have questions, or here's Tyreek Hill, or here's, we don't get to see a lot of Patrick Mahomes, which that's fair.
Sure.
But, they make it a priority to give us players and, give us content still. So they've really made it easy. But before the draft began, we were doing pieces. I was lucky enough to go up to Indianapolis with Combine, the NFL Combine. Yeah. So we did kind of draft feature pieces on each player that potentially could land here with the Kansas City Chiefs. Did not expect them to take a running back first round, but I did a lot of quarterback pieces. So it is what it is.
Awesome.
But yeah, so it's just been kind of thinking outside the box and paying attention to what's going on Twitter, or wherever other breaking news is, and figuring out a way to make content in a world where there's not the obvious content available.
Yeah. Now that NFL Combine, did that happen before coronavirus? Kind of everybody got quarantined or not, or was that in the middle? Yeah, it did, right? I thought it did. Yeah,
kind of end February, beginning of March.
right.
So it was a lot because right after the Super Bowl, we had like 2 weeks off, and then immediately we took an 8-hour drive to Indianapolis for a week. So and then we were expecting to obviously come back and go into March Madness, which never happened. But it was a lot, but I'm super appreciative that we went because I had tons of stuff to do after that because we didn't have a whole lot. So in hindsight, it ended up being a great decision.
Definitely. I was fortunate. I've been able to go to the Combine a few years in a row when I used to live in the Chicago area because an organization I used to work with had a conference there every year, right around the draft. And then what was always interesting to me is along with the workouts on the field, all these teams would rent all these rooms so they could interview the players, like psychologically speaking and everything else. It was like there's a lot more, as much attention on that stuff as there was on the field, but they don't always show that off the field stuff. So I don't know if you saw some of that, but coaches are everywhere. It's a really cool event. I'm sure you must have had a great time covering that from a media perspective.
It was a ton of fun. And, the amount of work that Brett Beach, who was the chief general manager, and his staff put into it, just interviewing player after player after player and, really just doing their homework is amazing. And like you said, you don't get to see all that stuff that goes on behind closed doors, but talking to them and talking to the players and figuring out, did you meet with the Chiefs yet? Oh, almost every defensive back said, I had a meeting with them, whether it was formal or informal, every single one. And I was like, wow, they're definitely drafting a cornerback this year and running back first round.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. And actually, interesting now that you mentioned the NFL draft too, because that was super unique. That was all closed and that was in a virtual remote environment. And I thought it came at an incredible time, right? When most people, especially up here in New York State, where we were just literally locked down for 6 weeks. And they actually, I thought, did a really, really good job with that. Just kind of going into the coaches' rooms, homes in many ways. And the access was good. The player conversation was. So how'd you feel covering? Because normally you would have been there, like in Nashville or something. But meanwhile, so how was that from a journalist media perspective, trying to cover, again, a totally remote and virtual draft?
I actually really liked it a lot because for the first time ever, we got all of the draft picks almost immediately after they were drafted. So normally what would happen, I've covered a couple drafts, obviously not with Kansas City, but with the Bills. And normally what would happen is one person is on site at wherever, whether it be Philadelphia, Dallas, wherever we would have been, to get the new draft pick. Well, the other person would be stuck like right outside what we refer to as the war room, which is where the general manager and head coach and, all of their staff are there kind of really planning and figuring out what is going on with this draft. So I've been in both situations before. I've been at a draft with the new player, and I've also been, outside the war room. And this was really interesting because you never get a player right off the jump, especially first round. They go and do 55,000 other interviews, and then they come to you. Whereas this time around, they FaceTimed in almost immediately. And you're like, oh, okay, here's Clyde Edwards in there, Nice. But it was, you never get a chance to talk to, especially like the later round guys, like 4 through 7, you really don't ever get a chance to talk to them immediately after. But we got a chance to speak with them via Zoom because it was so easy for them to just log on and talk to Kansas City media. That I actually really, really appreciated this year. I know that that's probably not going to continue, but I really liked the level of access we had.
Sure.
Even though it was virtual access.
Yeah. Wow, that's neat. By the way, I was going to ask you, when Patrick Mahomes came to Rochester for the National Press Club luncheon, I think it was last winter. I can't remember the timeline. Were you here in Rochester still then, or were you in Kansas City at that point?
I was, and it's so weird. I actually sent the footage of him to KCTV.
Oh.
So without realizing that I would also be there one day as well.
So that was pre you talking with them and having conversations.
Yeah, I had absolutely no idea.
Interesting. So you got a chance to interview and talk with him when he was in town then, obviously.
Oh, no. I did not personally interview him. I sent the footage.
Got it.
I don't know if I had a Nighthawks game or something going on that night. Rich went, but I was in charge of sending all the footage out. So
That's super cool. By the way, that's probably when you had you're kind of lugging your own camera around still, right?
Yeah, no.
Do you still do like?
Rich claimed that one, but yeah,
Okay.
we both, we both would lug our own stuff around, and I still do that. I still shoot everything usually that I do.
Yeah.
At this point, I prefer it that way. So it's
You seem to get it down pretty well and came pretty natural in that sense.
Yeah.
Oh, so I was going to ask you this, and I don't know how much you want to talk about this part, but it's at one point I remember you had outreach to me and said, and it was kind of interesting for me. I felt privileged because you're like, hey, Mark, from a sports business mentorship perspective, you were kind of thinking, hey, do I really want to stay in the sports industry? Do I want to continue in sports PR and media and communications? Or is it time, like what happened to me with my dad one day, Mark, time to go get a real job, get out of sports. What are you doing? So is it true that you did go through those moments where you were not sure to stay on the sports path, and how did that kind of come out to play? And obviously, I think it seems like you made the great decision, present moment. So can you talk about that a little bit from a sports business perspective?
Yeah. So, I'm not going to lie, just like full disclosure, I was in a relationship at the time, and there was a little bit of pressure to get out of working the weird hours. And, I wasn't making a ton of money in Rochester. Sports journalism in particular does not pay well, at least for the first couple of years that you're in it. And I made $19,000 my first market in the Lehigh Valley in a year.
Yeah.
And then, Rochester was better, but it wasn't a livable wage. You really can't live on like $33,000. You can't. And when you're living in a 1-bedroom apartment and you have student loans and everything else, it's not feasible. But I debated, like, is this for me now? I don't know anymore. And I was looking at all of my friends, and they're taking vacations. Like, they have money
Sure.
to take vacations, and like, I don't even have enough money to go to Wegmans.
Right.
So
yeah.
it's
and you're getting called at like midnight on Saturday because you got to put a story in because, the Rhinos played a game at 11 o'clock at night or what have you.
Yeah. So, it was those type of things that I started to weigh, well, is this worth it? And there came a point where I kind of, like you said, I reached out to a couple people and asked about transitioning out of the industry. But then I started talking to some other people that I know, and it's like, okay, you're always going to have, if you're not truly ready to transition out, you're always going to have this weird thing in the back of your mind of like, what if I'd stuck it out? What would have happened had I not changed my path and given up? And so I kind of wanted to see what was going on this contract. And that's, once my contract was coming to a close in Rochester, it was kind of like can I do it and can I not? And there was also some decisions being made there in itself, like whether or not I would transition into a news role, because people are cutting sports departments all over the nation. And, sports people are not paid as well as like anchors for news. So, is that something, do I want to stay in broadcast, but transition out of sports? And I don't know, there was something like very deep inside of me that's just like, do not give in. And I didn't give in before, and I didn't give in at that point. And sure enough, everything kind of came together just the way it was supposed to. So who knows if I'll feel this way, once I get married or have children or things like that, that can always change. But, right now I made the best decision. But it was hard. Like it wasn't easy to sit there and, eat ramen noodle the whole time.
Yeah. It's thanks for sharing that story, because your path is not that dissimilar for most people's paths in sports, right?
Yeah.
No matter if you're in ticket sales or sponsorship or marketing, and nobody's starting at the president CEO level, the entry level wages are extremely low. You're working crazy hours. And I would say if you were to talk to anybody that's in the sports industry, they all have those moments, is this the right path? Do I want to stay in sports? I've had it numerous times through my career. And to your point, and it's always going to evolve and change, but you got, follow the opportunity, follow your passion. And I think
Yeah.
though, but most people in sports always come back to though, but it's ultimately like it kind of gets in your DNA. It's what you do. It's your passion. And even though some people might be at the beach for 2 weeks, the other 50 weeks of the year, they're not enjoying getting up Monday mornings, and
Right.
we're all, here we go. We're like, okay, wow, what day is it? So, yeah, so that's a really interesting story. Cause I think that's another thing. A lot of people that want to get into this industry, especially with a lot of sports management students that I talk to all the time. And there's hundreds of programs literally now across the country and graduate programs. And, your story is no similar. That's not that dissimilar than my story and the way the industry is. So,
Yeah, it's a weird beast. And I've worked in sports since I was 15. I had my first job at a ballpark. I was the mascot. Hey, but it's so much. And it is a lot, to deal with, especially when it comes to, like I said, personal life situations can often clash with that. But number one, you have to find someone who is supportive of your job no matter what, and supportive of you following your dreams. But you also have to it comes with the territory, and it is what it is. Like, and if you can't see yourself doing anything else, don't risk it, because again, like, you're always going to have that what if I hadn't given up.
sure.
So, and I just couldn't live with myself if I had done that. So.
And there you were at the Super Bowl, enjoying the championship,
It paid off.
right? And I was so happy for you. I was like, oh, that's awesome. Rochester, New York, Breland, there she goes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Who knew? Who knew? The first year I was here, I went from a team that struggled to just make playoffs to Super Bowl. So
that's true.
It was great.
True.
No shade on the Bills.
All of the Bills,
I love the Buffalo Bills.
They did have a great playoff game this year, though. You must admit that was
Yes,
probably one of the best ones of the whole playoff tournament this year.
And I was rooting for them to win, but not because whoever won that game was coming here to Arrowhead. And I knew it was going to be difficult to internally root against the Bills, because I still have friends on that team. I still have friends on their staff, in their front office. I was at the Super Bowl, and Vic Carucci from the Buffalo News came up to me, gave me a massive hug. I didn't even know who was behind me. I just got bear hugged, and I turned around. So, at the combine, I saw everybody, and they are just the nicest staff ever. So as much as I wanted them to win that game in playoffs, I also was happy that they lost, because I could not have done that.
Yeah.
Had them come to Arrowhead and had to actively be like, okay, well, I hope the Bills lose, because I want the absolute best for all of them.
Totally. That is tough to stay neutral, right? And then, of course, you have your own personal fan allegiances, so you got to put that on the back burner too sometimes as well.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I always have, loyalty to Philadelphia sports teams, but because that's where I was born and raised, outside of Philadelphia. But it's one of those things that I've always had to deal that I don't watch my personal sports until the team that I'm covering is done. So with the Bills, it was kind of easy, because they only made playoffs once when I was there. So I was able to watch the Eagles, especially when they won the Super Bowl in 2017. But I kind of put Philadelphia on the back burner, focused on what I was doing. And then, once they're done, I become a fan, and I just watch football or whatever it is for fun. Obviously, that did not happen this year.
True that.
I had to go all the way.
It was almost there. Yeah.
Yeah. Job comes first, and then fun things after. I think that's for everybody. I think.
Totally. So while we're on this subject, just to finish this one, if you, and I'm sure you do this, I'm sure you go to sports management classes, or you have, go on Skype calls with sports management programs. What advice would you then give to somebody graduating, or maybe a year or two removed, going to graduate in a year or two in sports management, and they want to pursue a media, journalism, communications, sports, profession? What do you tell them?
It's hard. It is so hard. Like I said before, you really sacrifice your personal life. You sacrifice money for, this is the first time I feel like I'm an actual real adult. And I'm turning 28 next month, and I'm finally making enough money where, like, I'm not charging things on a credit card, or like calling home for mom and dad every time something breaks on my car. This is the first time I'm able to afford things for myself. So, that's not that's not normal for someone who has a college degree, at 28 to finally be like, okay, I have money in my savings account, but that's the way that it is. It is normal for sports because it's such a weird animal. You work a ton of hours. You are constantly traveling. I mean, in some cases, maybe not in everybody's case, but you do a lot of traveling, you do a lot of weird hours, and there's a lot of sleepless nights, and it's a grind. But I can't see myself ever doing something different than this at this point. And like we talked about earlier, I contemplated getting out of the business, and I could not fathom doing anything else because I love what I do. And that's the secret to it, is you really, really deep down have to love your job, and you have to love what you do. And it's like, I cannot imagine waking up every day, going to a 9 to 5 in an office and just sitting there all day and crunching numbers or doing something else. Like, I love it. I love getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning to be at stupid Chiefs practice by 8 o'clock.
Right.
It's so dumb, and it's so irrationally addictive, because it's like, who wants to, it's the Chiefs, but when you really think about it, like getting up at 7 a.m. to be there until 11 o'clock at night, like, who wants to do that? But I do. Right. I love it.
And even after you see the guys, like the first couple of times, you're like, oh, there's Patrick Mahomes. But then by the 50th time, you're like, oh, okay. Hey, Patrick, what's up? You know, not to take it away all that way, but still, yeah.
Yeah, it's totally a thing that people are like, oh, yeah, like, you must love hanging out with Patrick Mahomes. I'm like, not really. He's kind of boring. Because it's like, once you see, like, we refer to it as like seeing how the sausage is made, so to speak. And it's just kind of like,
true.
Who cares? Yeah. They're just people to me at this point. Yeah. They have extraordinary jobs. The first time I spoke to Andy Reid, though, I will say, because he was one of my favorite childhood coaches growing up as an Eagles fan. So the first time I spoke to Andy Reid, I had a moment. And it's really fun because now we get along really well. And he constantly tells me, there you are again. You always work so hard. I'm like, I text my mom immediately. I'm like, Andy Reid says I work hard, Mom. Like, he's impressed with my work ethic. And, so Andy Reid's a little different, but for the most part, they are just people who are roughly my age and make a ton more money than I do, with like an extraordinary job.
True. So. But it is your child. Like you said, you followed this coach from childhood. He meant something to you. Those are cool moments for sure. By the way, you're really good at your job, so that helps too. I may add.
Thank you.
You're really good, but there are 80,000 people that still would want to be there with you during that Monday morning practice too. Get that cool access, because most fans never get that experience for sure. Yeah. So you got to think about that.
And that's the thing, like, it is cool. I have a really, really awesome job, and everything that I do, I'm so blessed to be able to have these experiences. But if you do it 100 times, then it just becomes like.
What you do.
Yeah. It is what it is. And then it takes somebody saying like, oh my God, we're hanging out with Tyrann Mathieu all day. And it's like, oh yeah, I guess that's pretty rad. Yeah.
Totally.
It takes a little bit, or it takes someone else, sometimes to point it out, like how rad it is. And then you're like, oh yeah.
Of course.
It's pretty neat.
Yeah. And and I've been fortunate too, because when you're in the industry, you happen to be in those moments where, especially I'm sure at the Super Bowl, like every athlete, every celebrity's around all the time. And it is cool when you finally get to meet, like you said, for you and Andy Reid, or I got to meet Peyton Manning and Michael.
I almost ran over Jerry Rice.
There you go.
That was super exciting, because he is absolutely, I know it's super weird because I'm like grew up an Eagles fan, but he is my favorite football player of all time.
There you go.
And I almost hit him with my tripod. And my coworker saved me, and she's like, by the way, that was Jerry Rice right behind me that you almost decked with that tripod. And I was like,
that's funny.
Do you think he saw me? Like, does he know I exist?
Too funny. That's hilarious. That's great. Okay, so all right, we got to take a mini digression. Well, it is related, because sports is going to definitely tie into this. So will athletes and leagues and teams. But obviously, just when we thought coronavirus, maybe we were kind of coming out of the woods on that a little, and maybe we could see light at the end of the tunnel of fans and teams returning to play. The George Floyd situation happened in Minneapolis, which almost everybody that I've, can say that was horrendous, what occurred. But obviously, and we were going to talk a week ago, and here we are a week later, and what are we, 14, 15 days later, and there's still protests in the streets. So what do you want to say about, like, why is this movement, like, just feel different for everybody? Why is it continuing so long? And then also, how is sports going to play in this? Because for a while, sports teams and athletes kind of just, they weren't saying much. Now
Yeah.
it seems like everybody's kind of starting to make their own statements. So what would you like to comment on the current moment?
I think it feels different this time because it's not happening. Nothing else is going on right now. So I think everybody collectively is forced to keep their attention on this one thing. It's hard to ignore it when you don't have other distractions or other things to look at. This is it. This is what is going on. So, and I also think it's interesting that this is the first time that I have truly seen support from white people, to be quite honest. I'm biracial, so I see both sides of everything, and there was a lot of like white silence in previous movements, which that's not to say that they didn't agree with it or whatnot, but I find that there is a better sense of allyship, and you're noticing that there are things being passed, there are laws being passed, and things actually happening this time because it's a collective unit, not just Black people yelling in an echo chamber and no one's listening.
Yeah.
Which I feel like has been the case for a lot of the campaigns that have happened, at least in my lifetime. So I think that it's really, really great to see, and I think that it's super important, and I'm happy that everyone is forced to look at it and forced to be uncomfortable and forced to make some changes. So I think that the past couple of weeks have been needed for quite a while, that I'm happy that it is finally happening. As for sports, I have been super outspoken about it, again, because like this directly affects me and my family, but also I, have said to a ton of other people, it's like, I don't feel comfortable not saying something because I predominantly cover a league that is made up of 70% Black men, young Black men, the same people who are being racially profiled out in those streets and dealing with these issues that we're talking about right now. So how am I going to sit here on a platform and talk for hours and hours and hours about their importance to the Kansas City Chiefs, but I can't make a statement saying that they're important as human beings? It doesn't sit well with my soul, regardless of what color that I personally am. It just, I was going to say something anyway, but especially, given nature of my job, I think it's appropriate to say something. And I think that's, they have taken, especially in the NFL, they've taken the momentum outside, the reason why it feels different, and use that in attacking their internal problems. I think that the players' message to Roger Goodell and the rest of the NFL was extremely, extremely powerful and extremely needed. I wish that same energy was there a couple of years ago when they all basically just like left Colin Kaepernick hanging out to dry. And Colin Kaepernick literally was saying the exact same things we're saying now.
Yeah.
We just weren't ready to hear it, and I thought Roger Goodell's response back was equally as powerful, but I'm not sure that I buy it quite yet. Like, yes, admitting you were wrong is the first step. Admitting that you weren't listening, it is the first step to recovery, but there are so many steps that still need to be taken, that I don't know what your character and your behavior is going to be like after the spotlight has dimmed on this issue. The work still needs to be done, even though it's not in the forefront and, leading the A block of the news every day. And so that's where my concern with the NFL is. It's like, okay, well, you still need to back your players. You still need to make those changes. You still need to promote diversity in your front office and coaching staffs when this is gone, because this will fade from the news at some point. So it's like,
right, the
work still has to continue, even though you're not being pressured into saying something. Is that
yeah, no, that's fair, because to your point, it's like you said, 2-3 weeks go by, and then does everything just slide back to where led us to this moment, or is this going to be the catalyst once and for all for real change to happen? And it's got to be a lot of steps, you can't just flip a switch and everything's going to happen overnight and change. But I think everything you just stated is really accurate and fair. Definitely. Yeah.
So we will see. I hope I hope that, Goodell and his staff can really do some good, make some changes. But again, who are you when, number one, your players don't put you on the spotlight and don't put you in the hot seat? And number two, who are you when, again, this issue fades away from the forefront of everyone's mind where they're expecting you to do something? You shouldn't, I don't know, you shouldn't have to have the public hold you accountable to do good. So
True.
We will see. Only time can tell. But I sincerely hope that there is some permanent changes.
Yeah,
made,
and then
both in the NFL and beyond.
the other thing I was going to ask you as well, and it's this is related to gender equality as it relates to sports business and sports in general. And during this, when I was in quarantine, I actually watched that Billie Jean King movie, which I always knew the story, but I never really watched it. And then I was like, man, that was way back in the 70s. And here we are, 2020, and the U.S. women's national team are, more or less having the same argument. And I know it goes throughout sports and into even executive positions and media. So what's your take and thoughts on that issue as well in the midst of all these other issues that are happening at the same time?
Yeah, I do think it's gotten better, from when I first started. And I also think that it is at least in my experience, the higher in market. So for people who don't know, I know, Mark, that but media markets, there's about 300 of them. New York is number one, LA number two, so on and so forth until you get to wherever, Alabama or whatever small teeny tiny town that is in the 200s or so. Kansas City is 35, Rochester 76, Buffalo is 50. And I have found that the higher the media market, the more women are in the business. And also, I've noticed here, at least in Kansas City, that there are also more minority people as well. So maybe that's just a coincidence, and that's just kind of unique to Kansas City. But in the Bills media room, it was myself, Jenna Cottrell from Channel 13 in Rochester, and Heather Prusak from GRZ up in Buffalo. That was it for the Bills media room, and 50 white men, all of them white men, most likely middle-aged to old. That's it. So that was really frustrating to see. Now, since I have left Rochester, every station now employs a woman in their sports office, which is really, really great. Still no minorities, but we are slowly but surely working on that. So I think it is getting better, but yeah, definitely not where it needs to be, unfortunately.
Sure, most definitely. No, thanks for sharing your thoughts on that issue as well. And okay, so we've already zipped by, and it's been 30 plus minutes. So that's been awesome. We probably could talk way longer, but I do have one other thing I was going to ask you. Oh, wait, Scott, not yet. Hold up. Oh, no. Scott, can you give me couple more minutes? Sorry, before we wrap. Sorry. I was going to ask you just some of your favorite memories, either sports moments from Rochester, or actually there'll be two questions. Favorite sport moment if you have one, and then kind of what do you miss about the Rochester community since here we are in the Rochester, New York area?
Yeah.
Right.
So my favorite sports moment for sure. The first thing that came to mind, like when you said favorite sports moment, is like automatic, just flash of the Nighthawks playoff run. That was the first time that I covered a team that ever that won a series in a playoff game, like ever. Lehigh basketball didn't do that. Like no one has done that. Obviously the Bills didn't do that. Like no, I did not see a single person in a playoff series or a playoff game. And for them to go to the championship and make it the first time that the NLL had a tiebreaker third game was absolutely amazing. Unfortunately, obviously they lost, but it was still so much fun to just be with that team and cover that team. And actually, I flew to Halifax to see them,
I know.
to see their front office and see some of the guys because I missed them so much. And we were texting back and forth a couple of times, like me and the people from the front office, Avery, Charlie, John. We were all going back and forth, and I was like, you know what? Because they wanted Super Bowl confetti. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to ship myself with the Super Bowl confetti. I'm just going to come. How about
awesome,
that? And
awesome.
so we had a phenomenal time. But just spending time with them and that playoff run was so much fun.
Because you're a lacrosse girl too. I know that, right? You love lacrosse. That's your sport.
Oh yeah, I love lacrosse.
Yeah,
It's been really rough here because this is not a lacrosse town, but don't worry. I've already found the only NCAA program. It's Division II. Shout out Rockhurst. And Kevin Calley, who was the head coach, he is from Buffalo, played for Syracuse during the championship teams in the 2000s with the Powell brothers, and we are like best friends. So like I found it, even though it was kind of nearly impossible to find it out here. But yes, just the authenticity of people in Rochester. You know, I had such a great community there, and people were so nice and supportive. You know, I miss them dearly, and I miss my little home in Fairport that I had rented in my little neighborhood. And you know, just there's so many good people that I left behind, and I think that's the hardest part is I found a community, I found people that I genuinely enjoyed and loved dearly, and I had to unfortunately pack up and leave them behind. Don't worry, I'm coming back in October, hopefully.
Cool.
For the Bills Chiefs game, and I'm going to spend some time in Rochester for a little bit,
nice.
just to reconnect with my fam.
Awesome.
That's not my fam. So, but yeah, I just really miss that sense of community there. It's a great place to live, and you know, I was genuinely sad to leave it and to leave all that behind because it was such a great experience.
Yeah. Well, one thing I can share with you, just having moved so much myself, being in the sports industry, and you've already moved a couple of times already, and if it continues that way, it's great because you always have those moments. You have the relationships that you've made. They never leave, especially now with social media and everything, and you can always go back and visit. And then sometimes you end up back in the same town. You never know how it works. So,
we'll see. I don't miss the snow.
Yes.
I will say it only snowed here like 3 times, and that was phenomenal.
Yeah, we had a rough winter this year for sure. Breland, before we close, just anything that you want to just close with, or any social media channels that people can follow you on, or anything else that you just kind of want to draw attention to before we close it?
Yeah, I mean, if people want to follow me on Instagram, it's just at Breland Moore, BRELAND MOORE. And then I also have a Twitter as well, and it's Breland, my first name, BRELAND KCTV5, and that is Twitter. They made me change my handle.
I saw that.
Be station official. You know how that goes. So
sure.
But yeah, those are both my things. So if you want to know about Chiefs and other things, fun stuff as well, of course, give me a follow.
Well, Breland, thank you so much for coming on. You look great. You sound great. I'm rooting for you all the way. So I appreciate you sharing all the information, and hopefully maybe I'll get a chance to see you come the fall. And Scott, we're good now. If you don't mind, we can wrap the show. Breland, thank you so much.
Of course. No
all
problem.
the best to you. Stay safe and well, all right?
You as well.
Thanks.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Today's show was brought to you by Freedom X Sanitizer for Business. Keep your employees, customers, and clients safe with Freedom X Sanitizer for Business. Visit freedomxsanitizer.com. And by the Startup Summit Rochester chapter. Startup Summit Rochester will be held on Wednesday, November 11th, 2020 at Spot Cowork in Henrietta, New York. Visit the freedomsne.com Startup Summit page for information on speakers, sponsorship, and registration.